Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another incredible Zoomcast. I'm joined here by my lovely co-host, Jessica Midkiff. Jessica, how are you doing?
Pretty good. How you doing?
I'm doing good. We co-authored a book called Men Fight For Me, and we film one of these little Zoomcasts, which is basically a Zoom meeting that's recorded. I call it a Zoomcast, and one for every chapter. And we're working our way through the book so that we can just get a lot of conversation going about this incredible topic.
Let's do it. So, Alan, tell me. I know we have a lot of special guests that come on with us and have like these great discussions with us. Can you let us know who we're bringing on today?
I can, Jessica. I'm really excited. This is an important conversation. I've been looking forward to this particular Zoomcast because the legendary Rachel Thomas is going to join us. And we're going to learn where the title of the book came from and hear some important things. So let's see if I can bring her in here. Let's see where she is.
Bring her on in.
Come on in, Rachel. Where's your camera?
Rachel.
There she is right there. The legendary Rachel Thomas. Rachel, how are you doing?
I'm like, where's the legendary me? Hi. Yo, how are you guys doing?
Well, we're doing good. And Rachel, as we mentioned before, Jessica and I are filming one of these little Zoom casts, one for every chapter of the book. I have a question. I ask this of every special guest. Have you ever heard the term Zoom cast before?
No.
No. Okay. I love that. I think we invented it. I'm pretty sure so far no one's heard of it. And it's nothing too high tech. It's basically, think of it kind of like a podcast, except we're on Zoom since the rest of the world is, on Zoom this whole year. And we just hit record. And then we're going to start posting. This is a Zoomcast. That's what we're doing.
Love it.
Yeah. Well, this is going to be a really great conversation. I've been looking forward to having this particular Zoomcast. Rachel, we're going to get into that in a minute. But before that, let's just talk a little bit about some of what you're doing, how you're filling your time. You've got your hands on a lot of different pots doing some really great things. One of the important things that you founded and run is the Sowers Education Group. Tell us a little bit about what is that? What's happening there?
First of all, Alan, thank you for saying it right. So many times, I guess when you look at it, it looks like Sours, but it is Sowers. Yeah. And it is because we are trying to sow seeds. Mm-hmm. We are sowers of seeds. Nice. About sex trafficking and about survivor empowerment, and we know that no one of us or one agency can solve the whole problem, but we're all sowing the seeds that will hopefully take root and sprout and change at least one person's life and maybe on a larger scale than that. So
that's amazing. And as part of that effort, you have a recently published curriculum called Ending the Game. Tell us about Ending the Game.
Yeah, well, not too recent. So that was published back in 2015. Ending the Game came out. Yeah, so it's crazy. Last year was our 5-year anniversary. Yeah. Now we are in 190 facilities. We have about 1,100 trained facilitators in 37 states. So, that is our baby. That is now what? I guess kindergarten will be 5 years old. Cool. Which is actually appropriate because we were published last month by the Journal of Women in Criminal Justice. And so after crunching the numbers and doing the research and partnering with our university collaborators, we were found to have positive, significant impact in our 5 target areas. So,
that's incredible.
Yeah, it is. It is. What God has done with that just is amazing.
So that's what I was referring to. Something happened a month ago. I knew that it had been around a while, but it was recently published in what you just mentioned, right?
Right. We were published in a journal article. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Okay. And then my favorite accomplishment for you is the Cool Aunt series. And, forever I go speak at things, whether it's a living room or a one-on-one or a big picture thing or something. And eventually somebody says, well, how do I protect my kids? And what should I do? And what are some of the warning signs, et cetera, et cetera. And I felt like I had a different answer every time somebody asked that. I never quite had a great go-to answer. And then I came across the Cool Aunt series, and you sent me a link. I went through it a few months ago. Tell us a little bit about what's happening there, why you created it, and what's happening with the Cool Aunt series.
Man, the Cool Aunt series is It was born from my own niece running away from home, but we didn't know if she ran away or if she was lured out or if she met somebody on Instagram. And my 12-year-old niece was missing for about 10 hours. And it was the scariest time for me.
Right.
And I had a lot of, fears and regrets, and knowing what we know in this field, I'm thinking the absolute worst. And I'm like, why didn't I sit her down and talk to her? And she had just turned 12, 11 years old, straight A, good home, not one that acts out, and so not one that we would consider at risk. And, as parents, as aunts, it's hard to have a sex talk with the kid, but it's harder to have a sex trafficking talk, because now we're talking about trauma and abuse and sex. And it's just like, where do we start with this? And so I had regrets for not sitting her down and talking to her. And so I really created this series as a tool for family members to use with the youth in their life, and really to just press play and let us do the talking. And then, you guys can debrief, but there's questions for understanding. There is a certificate of completion.
Yeah.
So just not putting all the responsibility on the schools, because not every kid goes to a school where they're talking about it. So then who's going to talk about it?
Yeah. Well, it's just really, really well done. And so thanks for doing that. It's going to be a powerful tool in the lives of a lot of kids. In fact, just a couple of days ago, we had some friends over for dinner, and their daughter's entering her senior year in high school. And we were talking about saving innocence and the work we're doing. I said, sit down, go get the Cool Aunt series right now and let your daughter go through it, because it's really powerful. Yeah. Well, so part of the reason why I'm excited to have this conversation and why I was very honored and excited we both were to have you part of this book is because so many people that start learning about trafficking and sex trafficking, the stats are so high of kids in the foster system and kids that have experienced a lot of early childhood abuse. And those are the ones that are most vulnerable, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so what can tend to happen is that your regular parents, moms and dads out there can think, well, we have an intact family and our kid's not in the foster system and they're fine. So they just tune out and think our child isn't vulnerable or susceptible to anything like this. And your story, which we'll talk about in a minute and is detailed in the book, sort of brings it all home, closer to home than we ever thought. And I don't know if you remember this, Rachel, but a couple of years ago, we first started this process and we were communicating a little bit, you and I, and giving me some input and content. And I remember, I don't remember if it was on the phone or just via email, but I told you that your story touched my heart because, like I said, suddenly this whole thing of sex trafficking got incredibly real for me and all the regular people out there that are doing their best to raise their family. And so I was grateful that you've gone public and you've talked about your story many, many times and have, kind of honored Jessica and I by sharing it in our book as well. So thank you for all of that, because it's really important.
Yeah, thank you. I just got the chills. That is exactly why I started sharing my story. After 7 years of silence and shame and confusion and all that, I'm like, listen.
Yeah. Okay, let's wind the clock back. I don't know when it was, 2016 or 17. Sean Robinson, who's I think best known for her, she was a co-host on Access Hollywood, if I'm not mistaken, back in the day, the kind of the TV entertainment TV show. And now she's running around doing incredible things for girls. Sean Robinson for Girls or something like that is her foundation. And she held an awareness event, a panel discussion in LA. And she invited a number of different people that have a perspective on this issue to come and be part of this event. And there's, I don't know, 100 or so people in the room or maybe more. And I was there in the room because Kim Biddle, the founder of Saving Innocence, was there. Jessica on our staff was there. And sitting right next to Jessica was Rachel Thomas, who at that point, I didn't know. I'd heard your name a couple times, but I didn't know anything about you. But you guys were all there and you both were sitting right next to each other. Do you guys remember that panel discussion? And what do you remember about it?
I remember the behind the scenes more. We were all, behind the curtain waiting to go out and just catching up and giving hugs. And I think I prayed with Kim and maybe Jessica too. So I just remember wanting to make an impact that night.
Yeah. How about you, Jessica? You remember that event?
Yeah, no, I remember I remember everything behind the scenes, I think, was like the comforting point before going out and like speaking about this huge topic, you know, because even then, even though it had been out for a while, human trafficking, you know, it was still really hard to kind of like communicate, right? In the masses. And I remember like grabbing onto Rachel. I remember grabbing onto, like, we held hands for a moment, and just like the comfort, you know. And like, it was just a really good event, like a really good turnout. And I think it reached a lot of people, you know, and we got to see like a blurb of a movie that was coming out with Garcelle Bouvier in it. Oh, so wow. that was like pretty awesome, where it was touching on an aspect of like exploitation trafficking. So it was a lot geared toward, you know, trafficking.
Good memory. You're exactly right.
That's great.
And you were looking flawless. So
thank you. I'm sure you were too, as always.
Yeah.
I was trying to keep up, girl.
What about me? How was I? Was I okay too? How about me?
You know what, Alan? It was yes.
Well, so let's get into a little bit about your story before you make the sort of groundbreaking statement that rocked my world. But like I said before, so many of the young victims of sex trafficking are already traumatized through their own people close to them, oftentimes, and maybe in the foster system. Rachel, tell us a little bit about your childhood and what was it like growing up for you in Pasadena? And what do you remember about what was going on for you then?
You know, I had the childhood that every child deserves. That if every child could have this, the world would just be a happier, better place, simpler place. It was perfect. I mean, you know, my mother's an attorney. My dad is a businessman, and he was a church deacon at the time. They've now been married for like 40 years. Just really, you know, a happy home. Every Thursday night was game night. I was a straight A student. I played volleyball. I ran track. We took a family vacation to Europe. I mean, you know, just really not rich, but definitely, you know, stable financially, but just full of love. My sister and I, we fought a little bit, but the love is always strong, you know, between sisters. And I have 30 cousins. All of my grandparents were living until recently. I mean, just a really strong family. So
definitely not the childhood that so many of these young kids who are being trafficked had. And that's what makes this so interesting and alarming to those of us regular people that are trying to learn about it. I remember one point I asked you to talk a little bit about your hopes and your dreams. Our book consultant said, ask her a few more questions, kind of develop a little bit of character development kind of stuff. And you came back with me, you put a long voice memo on it on my phone, which was super helpful. Talk a little bit about kind of in those years, your hopes and your dreams. What were you thinking about for your future?
Yeah, you know, long term, I've always wanted to open a school. I'm a teacher at heart. I used to line up my dolls, and like, I remember one lesson I had was the difference between lemons and limes. And I like, you know, would point out. And so I've always wanted to open a school and be a teacher. And then my short-term goal growing up was to just have fun in college. I studied abroad. I wanted to go away because I knew I was going to live in LA. So I'm like, let me get out of here and, you know, experience dorm life. So I just wanted to have a good time.
So leading up to your junior year, you're living the dream. You're having a phenomenal, so far, 19 or 20 years. And again, this is the part where I'm thinking about my daughter who, I don't know, maybe a similar age as you, grew up in a 2-parent home. We took some trips. She played sports. She got good grades, and she went away to college. And so far, like, everything is exactly the same. We went to Europe, you know, a time or two for my work stuff. So it's like really, really similar. And then things changed. You met somebody named Mike at college. What can you tell us about that encounter and what happened soon after?
Yeah, you know, and that's the scary part. Things didn't change immediately because it seemed like a great guy in a 3-piece suit, gave me a business card, said he was a modeling agent, had some models, you know, on his arms who were my age, friendly, beautiful young ladies. And so it seemed like a great opportunity. And, you know, I always say it was a 6-week period from when I met Mike to when I was a victim of human trafficking. And what happened in the main points of what happened in between there is that I trusted him, formed a relationship with him and Michelle, who was his main model, and, you know, filled out a W-9 after he got me a paid modeling gig. And, you know, this is just a simple tax form that anybody that's ever had a job has filled out. So it didn't raise any red flags. You know, I signed with his agency and agreed to, you know, pay him a retainer to represent me. And, you know, I had already made some money. And so really there were, I mean, looking back and knowing what I know now, there were red flags. But to me as a teenager, it was just a great opportunity to model. And so that's how it happened.
And when did it turn to what it became? What was it like in that moment for you?
It was about 6 weeks in, and we were headed to an event, and Mike and Michelle were in the front seat. I was in the back seat. Something pissed him off, and he started and yelling at her. And I, at that point, thought it was domestic violence, and I felt so bad for her. And I'd never seen anybody hit anybody, and so I was scared, just silent. And like, let me stay out of their business. Poor girl, she needs to break up with him. Like, oh my gosh. And, you know, shortly after the very next day, after I was safe at home and slept, I didn't even sleep that night. I felt so bad for her. I called Mike and I said, I don't really want to work with you anymore. You know, I tried to back out, and he straight up said, bitch, I own you. You're going to do what I tell you to do, or somebody's going to get hurt. And then he read off my parents' address that I had written on that W-9. And he also read off my home address there where I was living near campus. And he told me when and where to meet him that night. And he said, if you don't come to me, I'm coming to you. Wow. And so that's how quick it turned.
That's jarring, to say the least. You know, here's a young girl who grew up in a great home and a great family, and caught in that squeeze position of the safety and the life of your family if you don't do exactly what he does, which is the very last thing you want to do. Jessica, I was wondering, Rachel, in another Zoom cast, it's just Jessica and I, and she's telling, you know, a lot of her story. And I'm wondering if any of that resonates with you, that moment when Rachel's just discussing this light bulb moment of, oh, it's not business, it's not romantic. I'm not saying it was with you, Rachel, but, you know, sometimes it's a romantic kind of a situation or a business situation, and then it turns, and all of a sudden the script is flipped and it turns violent in some way. Do you remember something like that by any chance?
Definitely. I mean, I've even witnessed one of my exploiters, my main exploiter, you know, getting girls along the same line. So like, and you can correct me too, Rachel, it's like with the guy, Mike, he was set up legitimately. Like there was a legitimate with like this whole underworld or subculture to the actual, what he was displaying. So with my old exploiter and some of his friends, they would go up to girls and they would pass out their number or a business card, but there was nothing legitimate about what they were doing. They would lure the girls and then that was it. There was never, you know, hey, I'm going to fly you and get you a paid gig. It was never anything like that. So even just kind of showing, you know, the similarities and the differences, right? It was kind of like he already knew what type of young ladies he was going for. The young ladies that were coming from a good family, the family that really loves them, where she's not neglected. She's on the right, you know, she's at the right her own, as opposed to, you know, some of the kids that came up like me or some of my other friends where they were looking for the vulnerabilities and the broken home and the running away and stuff. So it like sparked a lot for me, but even seeing it on different levels, the exploiters that I knew were not legitimate. It was just, as soon as I get my hands on you, I'll throw you in a cage, I'll lock you up somewhere, I'll take you to, you know, it was never a W-9 or anything like that. And so not one being worse than the other, but really just seeing like how different, you know, these exploiters actually move with the same kind of thoughts in mind. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, that's important to, you know, for the audience. That's the target audience of this book are people that don't know that much. We're learning about this. And so that's what's really valuable, to kind of paint all the different pictures. Rachel, in the part of the book, and I know you've done in person and probably in the panel, there were some key words that you kind of mentioned that as you're telling your story for us in Fight for Me, we talked about psychological abuse, you talked about manipulation, you talked about isolation. I thought was an interesting word. And then there were even some suicidal thoughts that came in. We don't need to go deep into any of that, but I'm wondering if you'd like to highlight anything in there of what you were feeling in that moment of, oh my gosh, the lives of my family and my roommate and even myself are now hanging in the balance if I don't do this. What was some of those thoughts when you think of the psychological abuse? What does that look like? And manipulation, isolation?
Yeah, the means of commercial sexual exploitation are force, fraud, and coercion. And that first night that I was forced, there was definitely threats of violence. There was physical violence that night, when I didn't obey immediately. And so there was definitely the fraud with the modeling agency, the force of that immediate, this is what you're going to do, or I'm going to kill you. But months after I was in this situation, that is when the psychological coercion set in, really, where I felt worthless. I felt hopeless. For those who are well versed in like Stockholm syndrome or trauma bonding or even identity disturbance, you're in a cage symbolically that you don't see any escape from. You start to adapt to that situation, kind of like domestic violence victims then the roller coaster begins. Oh, today was a good day. Yeah, in comparison to the hell you've been living every other day. And so you start to adapt to it. You start to, see the positive sides of the trafficker come back because now you're obedient. Now you're making him his money. So he's not hitting you as much. And so now we're going to dinner and now we're laughing and joking, but all under the umbrella of you don't have a choice. You're going to be here. So then you try to make the best of it while you're there. If that makes sense.
Well, it does make sense. I mean, sadly, it does make some sense. Jessica, what stands out to you from your experiences when you hear things like what Rachel just said about psychological abuse and coercion and all those kinds of things?
That's just like the main thing that it is, right? And so like even hearing the kids and even myself of being a survivor, at one point you're like, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do. And I think that's where kind of like the disrupt is, you know what I mean? Where you, even if you know it's wrong, you just want to maintain the level of abuse. If that's what it is, you're basically just surviving. And so like, whether the abuse started right away, or like even in Rachel's case, she saw the violence unravel in front of her the first time. And she had it within her to say, hey, I'm going to back up. Like, I'm cool. And then him, enacting the second part of his plan, basically. And so a lot of times you kind of do what you have to do in order to survive and breathe and get back to where you need to be. And believe me, I've done it plenty of times, and not just with the exploiters. And I know we'll touch on the Johns a bit, but even with the Johns, in some of those volatile, violent situations where you kind of go along with in order to sustain the level of abuse so you're able to get away. Yeah. So I hope that made sense. Actually, it tied in. So, because Rachel, you said it perfectly.
Yeah.
Oh, that made perfect sense. Mm-hmm.
Well, okay, so we're sitting in this auditorium and I'm kind of roaming around in the back, and trying to support my team that's up there, and I'm listening to all this. And it wasn't the first time I'd heard a lot of this, but I was still learning. I was pretty new to Saving Innocence at that point. And Rachel, you were waxing eloquently, if you can say it that way, about, how you were feeling, and I was drawn in. And then it happened. You made the statement that shook me up, that rocked my world, that made me lose sleep. And I'll let you finish the sentence. You said something to the effect of, for the first 5 months, I was kind of trying to figure out a way to get out of this. And then you filled in those adjectives that you just did. I felt worthless and shameful, et cetera, et cetera. And then do you remember what you said after that?
I needed someone to fight for me. Yeah.
You said I could no longer fight for myself. I needed someone to fight for me. And I don't want to over dramatize the whole thing, but for me, it was in those, sometimes when you're in church or just with friends or something in a large group, somebody says something and you feel like they're talking right to you. This was a moment of confirmation for me. I'd been to Saving Innocence for a year, I think, ish. I was all in, I was already in, but now this statement communicated a lot to me. It communicated Okay, Rachel just confirmed that there's who knows how many girls out there, many thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands, just right in our country, that have given up. They feel worthless and shameful and begin to believe this is what they're supposed to do and all they can do, and there's no way of escape, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they needed someone to fight for them. And I thought to myself, I'll fight for you. I'll fight for you and you and you. I'll fight for you, and I'm gonna see how many people I can get to fight with me, like join the battle. Like it kind of fired me up, kind of lit a fire.
Yes, good.
And I think some of the DNA for the typical male tends to lean towards being a fighter, a protector, someone who's going to take care of their own, generally in the best case scenario in an appropriate way. But most men out there, and the target of this audience of this book is to men, and most men don't know anything about this. Mm-hmm. And so that's the message. I needed someone to fight for me. Okay, guys, we need to get together. We need to get organized, and we need to go fight for these kids out there or young adults that have given up. They deserve so much more. And so soon after, I was kind of marinating on that for a while, and I kind of retold it a couple places, and people are impacted. And a friend of mine says, you should write a book. I said, with all the stuff that I'm learning. I said, well, okay, let me think about that for a minute. And all of this was kind of coming together at the same time. I needed someone to fight for me. So for the longest time, the title was just Fight for Me. And soon after I kind of made that decision, I contacted you, Rachel, and went to Jessica and some others, said, you guys want to do this, kind of a voice to men. And everybody immediately said, yes, I'm in. And then in the last little bit, in the last 6 months, Jessica and I have been working with kind of this book consultant, and he suggested we put the word men in the title because that's the target audience. When people start searching for books and men's things, it'll pop up. And if that's the title, then put it in. So you didn't say men fight for me. You said I needed someone to fight for me, but we added the word men because that's the target audience. We're laser focused. Hey, men over here, come over here. Hear this, hear what we have to say. We got something important to say to you. And so here we are. And your story communicated to me that could have been my daughter. My daughter went away to college in San Diego. She came from a similar home that you did. That could have happened to her. And my message to men and women, parents, but men, this could be your daughter. This is not a foster care problem. This is not an early childhood abuse problem. Those are present in a lot of the kids, but this is something we all have to listen up to and pay attention to. So here's my question to both you guys. How come there aren't more people fighting for these kids? You said I needed someone to fight for me. Why aren't there more people fighting for these kids? What's happening there? It seems like it's very compelling. Like I think if people knew about it, that they want to fight. What is your thoughts? How come there aren't more people and maybe more men? We could say it that way too. What do you think about that?
Lots of things to say. I think that for men, one, there aren't more people fighting because they don't know about it, or they haven't yet fought the battle of finding worth in people, and they're on the side of the problem. They'd rather be the buyer, or they'd rather say, not my daughter. And, especially for men of faith, every person is one of God's kids. And so it's like, how dare you to these traffickers just snatch somebody? Yeah. Like my dad felt personally offended by this guy. It's like, I raised this girl and I love her, and you're just going to take her and use her for your purposes. Right. So it's offensive. And until people feel offended over people that aren't their actual kids and have that fight in them, yeah. I think that's the fire that we need to have for people in general, not just our own. And frankly, I think it's more tempting for men to go along with it and take advantage of somebody in a bad situation and become a buyer, or, put money over people and aspire to be a pimp or a trafficker and kind of look up to that ideal. And so you have to be a man of real standard and a great man to really be able to fight for this, honestly.
Jessica, what would you add to that? How come more men or more people in general aren't fighting for those that are lost in this space?
Rachel basically like covered it, right?
She killed it.
Well, I mean, that's what she does. She kills it.
Yeah.
But just to kind of piggyback off of that, I mean, it is a lot of things, and it is like a loaded question, right? I think a really big part of it is there are a lack of men teaching men how to kind of stand upright and do those things that are God-given gifts to protect, respect, love, cherish, so on and so forth. We live in a society where, you know, we're in the age of like hooking up as opposed to courting, or, you know, treating a young lady or woman, you know, the way that they deserve to be treated, you know, with value is priceless. Another thing is too, unfortunate, men, not all, but a lot. And so it
went out. Did it go out for you, Ellen?
It went out for a minute. Say that again. What's unfortunate?
It's unfortunate because a lot of the buyers and sellers are men.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. He says not all of them, but a huge number of them.
Yeah. And it's like, you know, just that accountability piece. You know what I mean? It's like, if you know better, you do better. And once you, can you guys hear me?
You can't. Yeah, you're good now.
Once you guys,
You're cutting out again, Jess.
oh, okay. Boop, 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 boop.
Perfect, but just the audio goes in and out.
Yeah.
It's, you know, my connection's acting really funky.
Yeah.
Let me.
Well, let me jump in. I think some of my answer as being a man, it seems far away. And that's where, again, Rachel, it's important that you're telling your story, because it seems far away. If I'm hearing about children or young people being trafficked, I'm thinking Cambodia and Thailand. I'm not thinking Pasadena or Los Angeles. So it just seems far away. And so my challenge to men, it kind of like to touch on what you said a minute ago, Rachel, certainly men of faith, but to men is, okay, let's view these young ones that are being trafficked as if they were your own daughter, because Rachel's story lets us know that it actually might be your own daughter one day. It's possible. And if we ascribe worth and value to every human, let's respond as if it's our daughter or someone close to us. And now let's see if that changes it at all. You know, I think of, you know, one of my favorite movies, and don't laugh at me. I know it's not totally authentic in terms of how human trafficking works, but I love the movie Taken, not because it's, you know, great, a human trafficking documentary, but I love the relentless pursuing, fighting heart of a dad. And I think, boy, if my daughter were to disappear into this world, I would summon my particular set of skills, and I would not sleep again until I recovered my daughter. And,
yeah, I could see that. Like totally see you transforming into that, and like having, I could totally see that.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I got a dozen friends that are well armed and ready to
go.
They're ready. So it's like, I do not want that to happen. But if it does, you know, a storm's coming. Well, the great Martin Luther King said an important statement among many. He said, an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And that's my word to men, to the church, to regular people, whoever. I can't imagine anything more unjust than the idea that one human would assert ownership over another human. I mean, we've been learning about slavery ever since the dawn of time. This is the most unjust thing imaginable. And then when you compound that with, many of them are 10, 11, 12, 13 years old when they get started, it's just absolutely preposterous. And so this is a threat to justice everywhere. We need to rally the troops to get going. Okay, a couple more questions. I'll let you both take a swing at this one. You know, you guys have both shared that you've encountered a number of buyers. I'm curious, if we have the technology and you could push a button, hit send on a mass text or an email or something, and you could send a statement to those that are out there buying sex, what would you want to tell them? Like, what don't they know? Now that you both have some time on the other side of that life, and you know you're moving on with your life in a great way, I don't know if you thought about that or not, but what would you want to tell those that are out there buying? What comes to mind? We'll start with you, Rachel.
You know, I always say like trafficking is just a system of broken people, including the buyers. I would say, I mean, in my nicest, most respectful way, to work on yourself. Like, if you can't sustain an intimate enough relationship that you have to pay for intimacy or pay for sex or pay for those things, there's probably something that in your personal life or in your character is repelling people. And, it's a Band-Aid. It's an addiction. It's something that is probably keeping you back in more areas than what you're even realizing. I like John Pulley. He is a former buyer who has come out and joined the anti-trafficking movement, and he talked candidly about how dark of a place he was in. Anybody that has to pay for somebody to be intimate with you is sad and it's pathetic. And you're better than that, and you need to strive for better than that for your own sake, let alone all the people you're hurting in the process.
You're better than that. Yeah, that's good. That's a good word. Be better. Jess, how about you? What would you want to say to all those buyers?
Where do I begin? So with that, it's just, there's this illusion that, these young ladies that are being exploited, it's their choice. And that it's not choice. And even if you're paying for it, or if she's 18 or older or under 18, regardless of the fact, it's still rape. It's still sexual assault. It's still wrong. And to think about it, if it was one of your family members that you love dearly, would you want them going through with what, these young ladies face on a daily basis? And just knowing that, the buying and selling of people in this whole situation, it's not a victimless crime. There is definitely always going to be a victim in that situation, and to never think that it's okay to purchase and that you're getting off scot-free, that you didn't victimize someone. One way or another, it's still victimization, and you have room, space, and authority to turn it around and become a better person.
Yeah.
It's never too late.
Good. That's good word. I look forward to the technology when we can communicate to all the buyers and let you guys speak to them. Okay, last question. You guys can both pipe in something. Why is this book important? And what I mean by that really is, why is this conversation to men? The book is aimed at men. So why is this important? You guys both said yes very quickly when I approached you with the idea. Jessica said, I'm in. She's turned down other book deals before. Rachel, we didn't know each other very well, or maybe if at all, when we first started this, and you immediately said, yes, I'm in. And you actually even said one time, I don't even remember this, but you said, I'm so glad you're writing a book for men. I thought, okay, I got a little bit of a affirmation. This is a good thing we're doing, because Rachel Thomas said this is a good thing to do. So I'm curious, why is this important? Why is this book valuable and important / the conversation for men?
I mean, I think for exactly your mission, that men do have a unique role to play, and they can go from being perpetrators to protectors. And I think that whatever, it is in toxic masculinity is part of the problem, but I like how you put authentic masculinity. That's part of the solution, Yeah. And men are powerful and, can really have huge impact, especially when organized and when fighting together. So I love it.
That's great. What would you add to that, Jess? Anything?
I think I've said it before. Excuse me. I think I've said it before, where I don't think there's a book out there like this, the way that it's set up. And I think that this is the beginning of actually implementing change. Like, we're able to go into people's homes. We're able to go into people's private spaces, and they have a safe space to read this and really get an understanding. So it's kind of like changing the world one step at a time, and someone needed to do it. And also too, I hope that it really it shows how well put together it is, and how good it is, and how healthy it is, because it is a man co-authored with a woman, and not just a woman, but a woman that has survived commercial sex exploitation, and all the wonderful voices of all the women that are in this book, where I think it just speaks volumes. So it's showing a level of respect and authority and so much more. So for me, just to generalize, is we're changing the world one step at a time. We have to begin somewhere.
I like it. And you just mentioned it, Rachel, and it's really true. Most of the buyers are men. Most of the sellers are men. whenever I go someplace, and this is all part of those early couple of years processing all of this. I heard Fight for Me, and then I heard Jessica's story. I heard all these things. And then every time I would go to some kind of an event or training or whatever it might be, it's almost all women there and almost no men. And it was bothering me. It's like, wait, men are the problem. How come there's not more men as part of the solution? And then, you know, sort of the idea, the light bulb went on. Well, if you can isolate and define a particular problem, whatever it might be, now you have an opportunity and a possibility of creating a solution. Well, this is very clear. It's indisputable. The biggest part of this problem is broken men. And so that's actually good news. We're 50% there. That means the biggest part of the solution, if we can get enough men to live the right way and think the right way, and, you know, join this fight, and it really is a fight, then we actually have a chance of seeing this go away. And I believe that. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing it. Well, I might be doing it, but I do believe it can go away. Rachel, thank you so much for joining us today and for joining us in the book. Really appreciate it. I don't know if you've seen it yet, but we've created a little website called fightforme.net. And that's where all this whole project is going to live. The book is available on fightforme.net. We've got resources, and in those resources, we've linked you, Rachel, and the Sowers Education Group. We've linked the Cool Aunt series, along with a lot of other possible resources. The blog, the Zoomcast will be posted there, and some other content. We'll just keep adding content, adding the conversation.
Right now, fightforme.net.
Fightforme.net. Yeah, and there's a bio there. For those of you that are out there just getting to know Rachel for the first time, there's a bio there on that website, and all of your social media handles and the different things that you've done. And so hopefully more people will follow you and what you're doing and buy the Cool Aunt series and continue to have you be part of this incredible solution. So thanks again, you guys both. This has been fun. I really appreciate it. And we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.